Hello, I'm Rufus King, and you're listening to One Host, Two Guests. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the huge debate over marijuana regulation. I'm here with Pierce Butler and Richard Lee Henry. Pierce, take it away, my man.
Alrighty. So, most Americans have heard that marijuana is regulated by the federal government, and it is. It should stay that way under because of the Commerce Clause. Commerce Clause states to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the states and with Indian tribes. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3. This clause gives the national government constitutional rights to regulate marijuana. The reason we don't leave it up to the states is because the states could start imposing trade barriers on each other and it would destroy our economy. The Commerce Clause was used in a 1938 case of Wickard versus Filburn. There was a wheat regulation during the Great Depression, and Filburn grew excess and consumed it for himself. The court stated that this affected interstate commerce because he was not buying from the open market, and that was lowering prices. What does this mean for marijuana? It means that under the Commerce Clause, the government can criminalize the production and consumption of marijuana even if it is legal in the state. This was settled in Gonzalez versus Reich. Reich lives in California where he grows his own medical marijuana legally. His house was raided by a federal agency and he was arrested. He sued the national government claiming they had overstepped its constitutional rights when it hadn't. SCOTUS ruled that he could possibly sell it and the sold product could go to a state where it wasn't legal and it could be bad for anyone caught using it. And under the necessary and proper clause, Article 1, Section... Anyway, the proper and necessary clause, or the elastic clause, gives the Congress the right to make any law that would help them with any previous articles in Section 8, or clauses in Section 8. And so regulating weed and making it a Section 1 drug is under the necessary and proper clause, and it should stay that way. It just needs to be that way.
All right, yeah, I
That's all
completely
from me.
agree with you, Pierce, but let's take a little break. Listeners' ears are killing them. Oh yeah, and now here's Richard Lee Henry on his side.
Thank you. Here's where I would disagree with you. Looking at federal attempts to control the substance, they just aren't successful, and an issue like this is below their attention. It is much easier for an issue like this to be handled by the states within each state rather than drain the resources of our federal government, which are better spent on issues at a federal level. Even with the argument of the Federal Commerce Clause to regulate interstate commerce, it doesn't apply to this case as marijuana is an intra-commerce, regulated within individual states. The federal government has no authority using the Commerce Clause because nothing is traded between states. Each individual state has the right to regulate marijuana within its own borders. States ensure that no trade will happen between their state and another by only distributing marijuana within their own borders, and there is no significant evidence for the federal government to enact the necessary and proper clause because since legalization, there has been no significant change in neighboring states whatsoever, and the states have officers patrolling state lines to stop smugglers, if any exist. The biggest reason for state control, however, is the 10th Amendment, which declares all powers not given to the federal government go to the states, and the federal government was never given such power to do so. It's plain and simple.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there too, Richard. But that might not... No. Now you've all had a chance to hear both sides of the story. Should the national government or state government decide on the issue of marijuana regulation? The national government says that they should regulate because the Constitution, while the state says they have the right under the 10th Amendment and interstate commerce, we as a group here at the podcast, all on the side of the state, but we can't keep it one-sided, so that's why we included the national argument. That just about wraps it up here for us at One Host, Two Guests. And on today's episode, we learned that the national government has the right to regulate due to the Commerce Clause, but the states regulate under the 10th Amendment and intrastate commerce. I'm Rufus King.
And I'm Pierce Butler.
And I'm Richard Lee Henry.
And this has been One Host, Two Guests.